I'm Father Jeffrey Mickler of the Society of St. Paul, a religious congregation of brothers and priests working in the Catholic Church in 30 countries using the apostolate of media. I have been a priest for over 30 years and been involved in Jewish-Christian dialogue for over 20 years. And I would like to address the issue of anti-Semitism. It predates Christianity. It takes on many forms. Sometimes it's purely a religious anti-Semitism. Sometimes it's social and political. And in the 20th century, it was unfortunately racial. Generally, all of these currents of anti-Semitism get intermeshed, tangled up, and they result in the suffering of the Jewish people in a very real way. In living memory, millions were sent to their deaths simply because they were Jews. Therefore, anti-Semitism can never be taken lightly. It's always a serious matter. And it's especially serious for people who are religious. If religion is used to persecute the Jews, it's particularly heinous because God has loved the Jewish people throughout history, sustained and nourished them. And through the Jewish people, through Israel, God revealed how to live a godly life in the midst of an ungodly world. Therefore, we have to be very careful when it comes to anti-Semitism. There's no such thing as being just a little bit anti-Semitic. One typical thing that many people believe, but which is not true, is that the Jews control all the banks in the world, all the capital. Now, some people just hear that, they accept it, they go about their lives and don't really give it a second thought. They have a bit of misinformation that can be corrected through education if they took the time to look into the matter. A number of years ago, one of the highest ranking military officers in the United States had that little bit of misinformation rattling around in his head, and he alluded to it in a speech, and needless to say, a firestorm of controversy broke out, and rightly so. He apologized and said, I learned more about the banking industry in the last 48 hours than I knew in my entire life. And he learned the truth. Well, there's a few Jews that are hired and part of the banking industry. But by and large, the banking industry is controlled by stockholders, boards of directors, international conglomerates. There's no one racial, political, or religious group controlling them. And all the banks are in competition with one another. That little bit of misinformation can be dangerous because this is what has happened over and over with it in history. The Jews control all the banks. I can't get a loan. It's the Jews' fault. The Jews control all the money. I can't get a decent job. It's the Jews' fault. There is a war that breaks out. Well, the Jews must be behind it for monetary reasons. See how that little bit of misinformation grows and becomes more and more malignant. Now, a person with that attitude, looking at the Jews as scapegoats, still is not acting on it. But then with that malignancy growing in their heart, they will say, well, I'm not going to hire any Jews. I'm not going to do business with Jews. I'm going to try to keep the Jews out of my neighborhood. Then the anti-Semitism has moved to the next level. And finally, person would say, well, since the Jews are responsible for all the injustice in the world, all the wars, all that's wrong with the world, we get rid of the Jews and there will be universal peace and harmony. You can see how that malignancy grows and grows and grows. Now, I don't know Mel Gibson, but I suspect he, like all of us, had in his childhood misinformation given to him. I suspect that he heard attitudes towards the Jews and others that were heinous or erroneous. Now, to his credit, he is not a vitriolic anti-Semite. There's no evidence from his friends and colleagues that he would spend all day and all night thinking about how evil the Jews were. He has worked for Jews, he has worked with Jews, and he has hired Jews. He socialized with Jews and seems to be comfortable with the broad spectrum of them. He has denied any type of conscious anti-Semitism over and over and over again. Nevertheless, in a drunken rage, vitriolic words flowed from his heart and from his mouth. Some of you out there viewing would say, I don't have a prejudiced bone in my body. Well, God bless you. The truth is, all of us have preconceptions. All of us have prejudices that we have to deal with and struggle with in our lives and in our souls. And many times, it's the unknown prejudice that affects us the worst. The psalmist says, deliver me from wanton sin, O Lord, but even from my unknown fault, deliver me. Now, Mel knows better than to simply say, I was drunk. It wasn't my fault that I said those things. When we become drunk, we're responsible for all of our actions nevertheless. The brawling, the cursing, the fighting, the adultery, the automobile accidents, and the anti-Semitism or bigotry that will flow out of the drunken state. It is our drunken state we're responsible for our behavior. Now Mel is going to need a multiple level assault on that anti-Semitism and on the alcoholism that dominates his life. And the anti-Semitism, I would encourage him to pray to the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of Ezekiel, the God of Elijah, the God of Moses, the God of Amos, the God of Jeremiah. Because it was through the patriarchs, the lawgivers, and the prophets of Israel that humanity, not only Israel, has learned how to live a godly life, to take care of the weak, the widow, the orphan, the stranger in the strange land. Sometimes I wonder why the devil hates the Jews so much. And I think it's precisely because of that. God loves them so much and has delivered through this very small people a very great lesson. The rabbis say evil comes out of the Yetzer Hara, the evil imagination. And the cure for it is the study of the Torah, the study of the Scriptures. And that's the beginning of the cure. But more and more, Mel Gibson and myself and yourself, we need an ongoing metanoia, a change of heart. Our hearts of stones have to become wiser, humbler, and holier. That's my prayer for Mel Gibson, and also the prayer for myself and for you, the viewer. I want to extend to you a very heartfelt shalom, because only the peace of God can make us tranquil inside and help us to live our lives in such a way that we can reverence one another, our diverse beliefs, practices, and races, and realize that all of us are children of the one living, loving God. God bless you, and may there be peace on you and your children.